We'll get going. I want to introduce our speaker. This is Laura Hancock. She's a CPA, and I worked with her a number of years ago when she was quite young and I was approaching middle age, I guess, at a CPA firm in Albany, and she's had some great experience, and so she's going to tell us about her observations and experience with work, and then of course we'll be open to questions. So I'll let her describe her background.
Great. Thank y'all for having me. I'm excited to talk to y'all about my experiences, and please, any questions, and let's let this be interactive. I graduated from the University of Georgia just a couple years ago, like Susan was saying, in 1991, and I went to work. I actually grew up in Athens, Watkinsville. My dad was a college professor, and I wanted to get out of Athens, and so I know now you're like, what was I thinking? I'm just kidding. So I got the job at Malden & Jenkins. I was really excited. I worked there for 7 years, and I did mostly audit. So I didn't know, when you're in college, as y'all all know, I didn't know what I would like. I wasn't really sure. And so I did mostly audit. We did bank audits. The Malden Jenkins office was really big on bank audits. And then when it wasn't bank season, I audited manufacturing. I did some governmental audits. And a bank season, the way that worked was you normally would start in September. You'd go out and do preliminary audit field work, start confirmations. If any of y'all taken auditing, you know about confirmations. We'd take a sample, we'd send out confirmations to the customers, basically saying it was a statistical sample. Do you owe this money? Or do you have this much money? And then we'd go back in at year end, and most banks are a 12/31 year end. So then I would come and get in tax season, but Susan and crew had already been in tax season for forever, right? So I did mostly individual taxes there. I went through the ranks, and I will say I learned so much there, and it's now, especially, you realize what you learned, as you get older, but I learned so much. And as I was preparing and thinking about what would y'all be interested in hearing and learning about my career path, one thing that I learned too is, that saying your mom probably told you get more flies with sugar or honey than you do vinegar. One thing that so you're brand new, you're really still learning debits and credits, and you're having to go to somebody who is usually a lot older than you and has been doing it a long time, and you're questioning what they've done. I would usually I learned pretty early, I would try to go to them and say, I was reviewing this reconciliation, and I don't think I can follow it very well. Or I would try to pose it to where even if you think that maybe it's wrong, you're not, you know what I mean? You're helping them show you. And a lot of times they would be like, oh, wait, I got that number wrong. Or they would be, oh, no, I did this, that, and the other. And so that was one thing I thought a lot of some people it takes a long time to learn that skill, but I thought that might be something as y'all are working through that, to always, be kind. And also it helps put the person at ease, especially as auditors, because you're questioning their work, you're having to figure out things, and you really are learning, because when you graduate, I know y'all are going to learn a lot from here, but you still have a lot to learn. I'm still learning every day. So I worked there. Let me think where we did the manufacturing. I loved doing the manufacturing audits. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if any of y'all even remember Bob's Candies was here a long time ago. So we would go. You do? Well, I got to audit Bob's Candies, and I always said it was kind of like going to Santa's factory, because it's the peppermint and all of that. And we would have to go and we would count inventory, and that was messy and a lot of really hard work. We'd count the inventory, and we would you'd learn the manufacturing process, and we'd have to do a lot of different audit work. Same thing I was talking about, the confirmations. We'd have to confirm with the vendors, do they owe you this much money? So that was really interesting. And I really liked, in auditing, you go out to a lot of different places and you get to meet a lot of interesting people. And sometimes you like them, and sometimes, you're glad when it's time to go to the next place. But I really enjoyed that part of it. So I got to be a supervisor, and I really had always wanted to get my master's. And so I decided to go to get my MBA. But I'm going to backtrack a minute. Let's talk about the CPA exam. Okay, sorry. So I took the CPA exam when it was like Susan and you did, when it was 2.5 days. And you didn't take one part at a time. And you didn't have a calculator. And it was essay, though. See, that's where I think, y'all, it's not essay at all now, is it?
There's some
simulations and things that you make explanations.
And I think that I would probably struggle taking it now, because I always did well with essay, because you just wrote and wrote and wrote. So it was 2.5 days long, and I will tell y'all some advice I can tell you about the CPA exam. It is a textbook test, and I know y'all have probably heard this, but if you want to take the CPA exam, go ahead and start taking it as soon as you graduate, because you're going to remember all of what you just learned then better than 2 years down the road. My advice would be start taking it, and because just like depreciation, let's think about depreciation. I have software at work that calculates depreciation. I need to be able to recalculate and recompute it, but I don't calculate depreciation every day, And you forget how to do it. It's a lot of things like that. It's great stuff. You need to know it, and you have the foundation, but you can look back in a book. You can, look things up on the internet. But my piece of advice on the CPA exam is go ahead and start taking it right after you graduate. And I will say, for my career that I'm going to talk to y'all about, that has opened so many doors. Even if you don't want to go into public accounting, for your long-term future, being a CPA has really helped me. People will talk to you sometimes where they might not have, interviewed you, or and also you make more money being a CPA. And it's also something that nobody can ever take away from you either. I was in public accounting for 8 years, and then the rest of my career I've been in corporate accounting, but I have always maintained my continuing education because I want to keep my license active. And I want to, like I said, I want to keep on learning. But I am glad and proud that I'm a CPA, and it has served me well. So I got my CPA. No, I did not pass it on the first or second time. When I finally got serious about it, I passed it. I passed 3 out of the 4 parts. And law was the easiest one that I did not pass. But I was glad, because then that was the least hardest one to study. It's hard, but that's, to me, the rest of it's harder. So I was very glad I took that. So I wanted to get my master's. I thought that I wanted to do a lot more tax and learn more different parts of accounting. So I went to work for a smaller firm in Valdosta. And I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, but I also learned that in the bigger firm, they were more consistent with how things, because you've kind of worked for different partners. Some firms you go to work for, you'll pretty much work for one partner, and then some other firms, like for the staff accountants, to kind of rotate, and they kind of put you where they need you, But at Malden & Jenkins, if I had a work paper for one partner, the other partners wanted my work papers to look the same. It was all consistent. And this other firm, they weren't quite on the same page as much about consistency, and one may have an opinion to do something this way and another one, and I struggled. That was not. I enjoyed the work, but that was hard for me. And maybe if I had started there first, I wouldn't have known the difference. But I did learn a lot. We audited Langdale. Have y'all ever heard of Langdale in Valdosta? That was also interesting. They're the ones that make Langboard, and they do all the forestry products. And so I worked there, but I started the MBA program at VSU, and I finished that in 1999, and I had our first child in 2000, like a month later. So I was really glad that I got my master's, and I learned a lot there. The VSU program was really good. From there, I went to work for a newspaper.
I didn't know she worked for a newspaper.
And they, the newspaper, I was the accounting manager at the newspaper, and that newspaper, they had multiple, I would say, I really should remember this, but about 30 different publications, and we were responsible. We had centralized accounting, and so even if the office was in Live Oak, Florida, I was paying their bills. And so that was interesting, because I thought, from public accounting to private accounting, I'm going to be bored. I'm going to have to see the same people every day. I'm not going to be challenged. It's challenging. It has completely different challenges, but it really is challenging. And I like both. I like in corporate accounting, you feel like a little bit more sense of ownership, because you're, helping every day. And in public accounting, you're working for the people and you're helping them to make differences in their organization. But for the newspaper, I had about 15 staff, and as y'all will find, a lot of times in accounting, even though we're not HR, payroll or HR reports to you, and I really didn't have much payroll HR experience. But one thing I was going to share with y'all, I was remembering that this had happened. One of our payroll guy, he had entered somebody's payroll rate wrong. And and I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say instead of $8 an hour, he put $800 an hour for the person. Yes. And this person, so after about 2 payrolls, the CFO was like, why is our payroll so much bigger? What is going on, right? Well, they realized, and they had overpaid somebody a lot. Well, that person, I think it was 2 or 3 payrolls she got, well, she had quit, right? And so, I'm telling y'all, it is interesting what you get to do and what you will see. And so I got to go meet with a lawyer and meet with that person and that person's attorney and our CFO. And needless to say, it was our fault, right? And we, in good faith, paid her. So she had already spent the money. And anyway, interesting things happen, and that was a good lesson for the HR guy, the payroll guy, to please pay more attention, and also an opportunity for improvement of controls, right? So we put in, y'all have never heard of that before, have you? We put in a lot more better controls with entering payroll rates, etc. But that was one interesting thing I remembered about that. Then from the newspaper, a friend of mine that I'd worked with at Mullen & Jenkins, he had switched gears and gone to work for a bank in Valdosta. And he contacted me, and I started working for the bank in Valdosta. And that was quite a shift. But one thing y'all will find, debits and credits are debits and credits wherever you go. That's one nice thing about accounting. And versus sometimes if you're really pigeonholed into a career path, you can't switch hats quite as easily. So I worked in banking. I worked there for 8 years, and because I audited banks, I understood banking. I don't know if y'all have ever heard anybody say that banking is opposite. And if you think about it, you're a bank, my loans are an asset and the deposits are a liability, right? Because I owe the customer the money. But banking is very interesting because with banking, even though it's most of them are, well, they all are privately held, it's a lot of regulation because you have public funds, you have money, so you have a fiduciary responsibility to the public and to the shareholders. So we had, in banking, we had regulators, we had auditors, we had internal auditors, and that bank was publicly traded, so we also had to deal with the Securities and Exchange Commission as well. So I learned a lot working there. I really did. I was I started out, I was the accounting manager, and I was over all of accounts payable. I was over the accounting staff, and I worked with Jay, who was the controller, and it was really a good experience. And that bank was like the newspaper. We had a lot of different locations, and so we had to deal with a lot of different people, and so that was really interesting. And then, as y'all know, in the bank, you know, there's a good, I won't say good, but you always have, because you're dealing with cash, right? There's opportunity for people to take money. And as y'all will find with accounting, what we do is we're kind of the sheriff a lot of times. You know, it is our job to make sure we have fiduciary duty to the shareholders, to the public, and to the government in that instance, to make sure that we're reporting things accurately and also that we are doing the right thing. And so I would tell you, if you're going into accounting, you know, you don't have to, but most accountants have a pretty high standard, or even the people that you work for hold you to a different standard, you know, and you have to be able and willing, in my opinion, to speak up, you know, because I've been put into some pretty hairy situations, and it's not easy to have to tell people bad news. You know, it's not easy to have to report that we had a really bad quarter and explain why, you know, but also I feel like we're also educators as well, because you know, the people you're going to work with are not accountants, and debits and credits and liabilities and all of that. It doesn't make sense, you know. And it's hard sometimes to speak a different language, you know, and that I think you will get with time as well. But my being in auditing and working in public accounting really has helped me in corporate accounting to communicate. But I was trying to think of I'll go back to public accounting to give y'all another experience. When I was at Allman Jenkins, we had somebody taking money from one of our banks, had taken from the vault. And what happened is, also, this is a really good audit internal control conversation. The person would always, one person, so they had two people that had to count down the vault every time. And one person always volunteered. She always volunteered, and she always wrote. She was always the one that wrote. And so when they were writing it down, she would change. And she didn't take vacations. And so there was a lot of red flags. I think she had had some personal issues. And so we were called in when they realized what was going on. And we had to go in and we had to count down the vault. We had to, you know, figure out and backtrack what had happened. So there's, in that situation, some internal controls would be, everybody has to take vacation. In banking, that's normally you have to take a week at a time. You can't just take a day here or there, right? Can't have the same people counting the money all the time. You need to switch up who's writing the money. You need to have an internal auditor come behind and check. So there's a lot of red flags, you know, with that. But that is interesting, you know, and that was a really delicate situation. And it was, you know, we had to be very careful with how we handled it, and so that was interesting too. But from the, sorry, I'm jumping around, but I'm trying to think about what I would want to know if I was y'all. When I was at the bank, so I had never done SEC reporting, and that is, you have to quarterly, so they have a call report when you have a bank, which is just your balance sheet and all your transactions, and then we had to do 10 Qs and 10 Ks, and so it's basically really amped up financial statements. And we also, in a bank, you do monthly financial reporting to the board. And so we had to prepare the 10Q, 10K. The auditors would come in, which was strange for me at first, being a former auditor, having auditors come audit me, and it was Malden and Jenkins, people who I worked with too. So that was interesting. But also, I think that helped me because you kind of know what they're going to come and ask. I mean, you don't know all the questions, of course, but they always kind of liked auditing former auditors or CPAs, or so, because you know what they're asking. But you can also give them a really hard time too. So, so that was, I learned a lot. Then my husband had an opportunity for a promotion to move to Macon, and I really liked the bank, and I was invested, and I enjoyed the people that I worked with. So I decided for me to switch gears from being the controller to being the asset liability manager. And I was really nervous because asset liability manager, what they do is manage the assets and liabilities, but it's more of a finance. It's investing, it's debt, it's really looking at the balance sheet and making, especially with the bank, making sure that your assets aren't a lot longer than your liabilities. And it's budgeting in that scenario. And it's actually, I got to manage the investment portfolio. And so I really enjoyed doing that. I was really nervous because I'm a debits and credits kind of person. I like debit. It makes sense to me. It's what I was comfortable with. So it really kind of pushed my boundaries, I guess. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned how to do different software. Have you ever heard of a Bloomberg? Mm-hmm. So I had a Bloomberg, and it's like this. It's obviously a software system. It's the traders, they have those, but I learned how to analyze bonds. And at one point, we had $200 or $300 million bond portfolio I was managing, and so I really enjoyed doing that. I got to borrow and all of that, like I said, because that's more of a finance option. But being a CPA, being an accountant, the door was opened for me. Budgeting, that was not my favorite thing. It still is not, but I do understand it, and I know, like I told y'all, the bank, we had 30 branches, and it kept on growing. And with the bank, you also think about interest rates. If you have a lot of variable rate interest and rates are rising and falling, you have to forecast that. And then the board and the CFO, they all decide how they have to make a stance on which way the interest rates are going to go. And you kind of do your line in the sand, and that's what it is. And then every month when it doesn't work out, you have to explain to the board, well, rates didn't go up or rates rose, So that was all really interesting, but that wasn't exactly my favorite thing to do. But we do have a lot of models that did that to predict and to help you. And then you'd do a draft, and then they'd send it back, and then you'd do a draft. No, change this one thing, and you'd do a draft. So I worked there, and then that was about, in 2009, it was the peak of the economy, and the bank, y'all remember, lots of banks were falling on really hard times. Well, they decided to let all ancillary people go. And so I lost my job. I was in Macon, and we decided to move back to Albany. And my husband works for a forestry, F&W Forestry in Albany. So he came back to the home office, and I went to work for AB&T Bank in Albany. And I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. Same kind of thing. It's very small compared to the bigger bank. And the bank that I was with, just they, the SEC, that actually was the Federal Reserve closed them. They wound up, they had just expanded and grown so much. So they got, I mean, it's terrible. So, but, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and some people, that really the higher executives lost their jobs, and then the local people, and they stayed, and the bank was purchased through. Y'all remember all that FDIC deals and all that happened? It was a really bad time in the economy. But I went to work for AB&T here, and it was very small. They have 3 offices, and I enjoyed it, but I just was more used to a challenge and the bigger operations. And so from there, I started working at a hospital. So I work at Phoebe now, and y'all are probably all familiar with Phoebe. I am the accounting manager. I am responsible for, and this is the biggest company I've ever worked for. We have about 4,000 employees. And some of them are contract, some of them, are hired, are some contract laborers and then employed laborers. But I'm the accounting manager. We, kind of like the other stuff I was telling you about, it's central. I pay all the bills, is what I always tell people. I pay the bills for the hospital. We process 6,000 to 8,000 invoices a month in our department. It's the first place that I've worked that uses purchase orders. And so religiously, basically. And so even at almost 50 years old, I'm learning something new, which I'm the kind of person, I like to constantly be learning and doing, improving and processing new things. So that's been really interesting. So our department has to really work with materials management. What happens, are y'all familiar with purchase orders at all? So the buyer sends out a requisition, and so the vendor sends in the invoice, and then we match it with the purchase order. And if it doesn't match up, they're hearing from me. So we have a lot of back and forth. And when I got there, the hospital had just switched to a new software system, and it's been a bumpy ride. But we have gotten it; it's a lot better. And right now I just have 3 employees, and they process. So a lot of things, if the purchase order goes out and comes back in and everything matches up, we don't even, believe it or not, have to touch anything. It all matches up and goes into our system. So that's how they can process that many. And we cut checks weekly. My boss is she's the AVP, Director of Finance, I think is her title, but she is over financial reporting. She's over all of the different, kind of like the banks. Hospitals, of course, are very, very highly regulated. She works with with the auditors. She works with the CFO. We answer questions. She works with the budget. And so she does phenomenal. The hospital has Phoebe, we have PPG, which is the physician group, we have Sumter, and we have Worth, and PPG, we have a lot of different clinics. So we have a lot of people that we help and work with. And so when the reports go out to the different directors, and I'm talking about the monthly financial reports, it takes us about 2 weeks to close the books, which you would think that it would not take that long, but it's kind of a step process. The PPG, the physicians group, has to close, and then everybody else closes behind that. And then we get the reports out, and then 2 weeks, and then we start it again. It's like it's always month in there, it feels like. But I've really enjoyed working there. It is definitely never a dull moment. It's always, I feel like we're always putting out fires, but just because there's always emergencies, and if you have 4,000 employees, things are going to happen. Payroll, I import the payroll. We have a separate department, and I import it, and then I work with the payroll person if I have questions. One thing that I was going to tell y'all about the hospital, and I hadn't thought about, Susan and I were talking about this, there's so many different opportunities in a place like that for accountants. So today I had somebody call me, oh, can you tell me about this revenue? And I'm like, no. I can get you in touch with the person who does the revenue. Like, you would not think that there's people who all they do is revenue, but seriously, all they do is revenue. I can help them with expense. I can help them with if I pay a vendor, with the purchase order. We've got a department that does nothing but that. It's called the chart master. Basically all the different billing codes, Medicare, all of that, insurance. Oh my goodness, that's their job. We have people that they look at the allowance. So the billing, what is billed and what we're really going to get. There's so much that gets written off. We have a department that they do. It's kind of like the cost report, but it's the reporting to the government, Medicare, Medicaid. They do that. We have in our department. We have a health system accountant. So we have health systems, and then we have that owns all of those entities I was telling y'all. And so every month they do eliminations to prepare the financial reports. We have a foundation accountant. She's responsible for foundation, and she's responsible for the investments. We have myself, who I'm the accounting manager. I do the help with financial reporting and accounts payable and whatever else Joy asked me to do. Joy, who is over all of us, we have an accountant that does property taxes. She does some of the other entities. We have a few other entities because we own the Starbucks and Phoebe Health Ventures. And then there's a fixed asset accounting. That is all she does, is fixed assets. And we have a cash accountant. That's all she does is she does other things. So there's a lot of different opportunities. I had never thought about, well, there's just a section that all they do is worry about, the revenue and the billing. Then we have patient accounting, where if you go to the hospital and you need to pay your bill, that's a huge department, because they're dealing. So patient accounting does the billing. They also talk to the insurance companies. They post those payments. They call you to pay your bill, and then they also work with sending in the bills to the collections. So I know I've rambled a whole bunch, but I just think that there's a lot of different opportunities out there for y'all. And I love accounting. I'm not too proud to admit it. It can be very exciting. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different opportunities. I always tell people, even if you may not want to be an accountant, if you can get through the classes and learn, you will have that foundation that you will always have, and you'll be a better asset for that company because you have that knowledge. I just feel like it can take you a lot of different places, and also having my master's, that's helped me as well, if y'all are interested or looking into that. Let's think, what else?
If somebody were interested in, had this bright idea, I want a career in banking, how would you suggest they go? Obviously, if you know somebody, you can get into anything easier if you know somebody that works there or something like that. But I guess, do most of the banks have a personnel office that you would just contact, or do you really need to find an inside person to try to get in touch with? Or
I think it's can go either way. I will say that a bigger institution, they will definitely have a full
Service.
yes HR department. I would start there. The older I get, the more I realize it never hurts to know somebody or to have somebody, even if I have had a lot of different jobs, but if you can have a friend or somebody that can, contact, even if one of your professors knows somebody and have them put in a good word. I mean, that really goes a long way. But also a good resume, y'all, a good resume. I've gotten to where I'll look at a resume like, nope. You can tell a lot about a person by looking at their resume. If I get a resume and there are a lot of misspelled words, no. A misspelled word just flies up at me though. And it's funny because my 2 children, they cannot spell at all. It drives me crazy. I'm like, how do you not see that? So if you can't spell, have your friend who can spell look over your resume, go to the counseling office, do that, y'all, because that is one of the first why am I if you can't take the time to make sure that your resume is spelled, I'm not going to waste my time. But I would say if you wanted to go into banking, I would make sure you got your A game on. You've got a great write a letter, and in your cover letter, personalize it. Don't use the same letter that you just sent to somebody else. Talk about how your career at that bank and what you can do for the bank. That's going to catch their attention, and it does not take long. If you can't do that again, same kind of thing. One thing I was going to say also, when you get into the workplace, put in the effort, be willing. I would have staff accountants or even employees that are like, well, this doesn't balance. Well, why? What have you tried to do? What have you take some effort? Your employer will notice that. They will notice that you're taking some initiative. Now, don't go off on a wild goose chase if you don't know what you're doing at all, but take some time and try to solve it. Try to say, or, say, I was looking at this and this is what I think, and then your employer hopefully will be like, well, I could see how you would think that, but and they will help you. But I always value employees more that will take some time, actually be interested. That's what they're paying you to do, So, and then if they ask you to work a little later, work a little later. I will tell you, y'all are not in a career that is 8 to 5. In my opinion, what I have done, you work until it's done. And if you don't work until it's done, you probably won't get that promotion. That's just, we are not in the, I see it at the bank, at the hospital. Here we go. I'll start at the bank too. All the time. You'd be working, but month end waits for no one. Your SEC deadlines wait for no one. That tax return is due on a certain day. Your clients aren't going to appreciate you being late because you needed to go home or, obviously you're going to have to go home at some time, but y'all know what I'm saying. Be willing to put in the time and it will pay off in the long run. I had to learn that the hard way. Sometimes I did not want to do that and I did not do it. But now, it really works. Like what I'll do sometimes is I'll just work through lunch because I don't want to stay till 7, right? And I don't work till 7 every day, but y'all know what I'm saying. I'd rather work through lunch than stay, till 6:30. And your boss, if you will do that, they will appreciate it and they'll see that you're hungry and that you want it, and it will set you apart from the other folks. It really will. So,
Questions?
oh, come on now, y'all, please.
Francis, I know you have
I
questions.
feel like I have a lot. But I'm just not really sure where to start. First of all, when you're changing from job to job like that, I love that you've had such varied experience because I kind of feel like I have too in my career. But did you feel like you had training? Like you said you didn't know how to do SEC report. Who taught you how to do that? Did somebody take the time there when you first went to Malden and Jenkins? How much did they train you with starting with audit? Because I'm taking auditing now, but I don't expect to know how to do an audit when I'm finished. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's a great question. I had some really good bosses, and I've had some not the greatest bosses. So I had some people that really worked with me and mentored. And I will tell you, if somebody has gone before you and has good work papers, you can do it. Don't y'all agree with that? If you really can take the time and dive into, okay, how did they come up with this number? Well, you've got the spreadsheet, you have the work papers, you have the general ledger, you can try to dive in there and figure it out. And same thing, like, your employer will appreciate that you took some initiative to try. But I had some really wonderful mentors. I really did. At Mullen Jenkins, they are really big on training. That was probably, I will say, probably, except for the bank, probably I got the most training there. I really did. And you did one-on-one with people, and they would help you. And they would also challenge you, like, oh my goodness, sometimes you'd get so many audit notes, so you'd turn in your work papers and be like, oh, it's so great and pretty, and give it to them, and they'd tear you apart. David Clayton one time, I have to call his name out, but anyway, he took it upon himself to try to give me as many audit notes as he could, and he did. He gave me a whole bunch, and I had to really work through it, but I learned through that experience. I really did. And it's very humbling because, like I said, y'all are going to go out there and y'all are going to learn so much, but it's not the real world, it's not. And you learn a lot through the real world too. You can kind of marry the two. And be willing to, if you have a person that really helps you, you wind up sometimes, a lot of times, going to the same person. Even if I was on a different job, I'm so sorry to bother you, but they appreciate it. That's one thing I like the most about, I like working with people and I like trying to train them, but I get frustrated when somebody doesn't try, but I'm not afraid to tell them they're not trying either. So be willing to ask for help.
Do you feel like at the hospital they valued your public accounting experience? Like I mentioned, I know one of your coworkers, and but she worked for Draft and Tucker before, which is big in hospital audit.
Yep.
So I just didn't know going into.
So for that, yes, I think they valued both. Because I'm not in patient accounting, I'm not in the Medicare field, because when I was interviewing at Phoebe, they were like, well, you don't have any healthcare experience. I'm like, well, this is for the accounting manager job, and I've paid a lot of bills over my career, and and I did have to learn a lot about, and I was humble, I promise, but I got lucky that it was a specific accounting. It was accounts payable. It was funny because I actually interviewed for a cost accountant first, and I was like, I was like, okay, we just give this the whole try. And so I walked in there, and this position, the lady was transitioning, and so the manager was astute enough when he saw my resume. He was like, oh, this is down her field big time. And so they were both it was two people interviewing, and he was talking about the cost accountant, and I was like, okay, pretend like you're really interested. And then she was talking about the accounting manager job, which was exactly what I've done almost my whole career. And so I was really excited that opportunity, that door opened. I don't know that they would have hired me for the cost accountant job, just because I've never done that. I think I could figure it out, but it's kind of hard to hire somebody who's got 20 years experience, and so in an entry-level position. So that is hard. And I will tell you, sometimes I have applied for jobs and I'm way overqualified, and that has shut doors, but I'd rather that be the problem than the other, So, so I tried to, when I applied, even on my cover letter, I was telling y'all, I tried to kind of say, I admitted it. I was like, I know I don't have hospital experience, but I have accounting experience. And even my boss, she has been there 12 years, and she didn't have hospital experience. And she's still Phoebe's just so big, she couldn't tell you exactly how they do all of that, but she can tell you all the financial reporting and, how we pull it all together. But in an institution that big, it just, we all really have to work together and to get it done. It's like I said, it's a step-by-step process, and you wouldn't imagine there was so many accountants there, but there really are, to get all of everything done.
kind of advice would you give someone who's going to be graduating in May with just a bachelor's and no experience? I currently work, but it's in a law firm, so it's completely different from accounting. So what kind of advice would you give? Like, what kind of jobs could I apply that they would, kind of look like, oh, okay, she has a bachelor's in accounting, but no experience?
Are you wanting to continue to get your
Yes,
CPA?
I intend to take the first portion, but it won't be until November with that window, and then I intend to do my master's, but again, that would take me some time. So when I graduate, I will only have my bachelor's.
Okay. So I think that you're graduating with your bachelor's, and you need to stop saying only my bachelor's, because that's awesome. You're graduating with your bachelor's. So have a little confidence and be proud of yourself. But I think that personally, and I know everybody doesn't want to be a CPA. I get it. But for me, working in a public accounting office was invaluable. It really was, because like I said, I learned debits and credits. And you're going to walk in there and you're going to go, I graduated, I know everything about it. You don't know debits and credits, y'all. You don't, but you will learn it. But you need to, in my opinion, you need to go somewhere being an accountant. You don't have to go into public accounting, but there's all kinds of opportunities for accountants, and you will learn it by doing it. I would say try to get your foot in the door in an accounting position, because even if you do it for a while and that's not what you want to do forever, you now know debits and credits and sales tax and payroll taxes and how everything works, and then you could be an asset to somebody else having that knowledge. And then my best advice, go ahead and get whatever you want to do, because it's going to be harder 2 years from now after you graduate. Oh, I'll do it later. Go ahead, get accepted, finish the drill. You won't want to take that test. You won't want to sit through that class in 2 years down the road. If you can do it, go ahead and try to do it. But that's exciting. I know you're ready too.
Yes, thank you.
You had a question?
Yeah. So was it hard for you to transition in or out of the banking industry? Just because I know a lot of people say that debits are credits and credits are credits in the banking industry.
So we were talking about that, and I think because I was an auditor early on in my career. I audited banks, and so it always made sense to me from the beginning. But yes, sometimes though, especially in banking, when we were trying to adjust somebody's account, we still would do the old T account, because it is confusing, and it is thinking about a loan being an asset. That is really confusing. But eventually it's it was more like when you were dealing with, I got to deal with at the smaller bank, I had to deal a lot more with the operation, literally day-to-day operations and that kind of stuff, balancing the cash, and that is confusing when you're balancing the cash. And but if you go back to the T accounts, I'm telling you, even my boss, she's been doing this a long time, we've been in a meeting before, and I've been like, Joy, you just got to tee it out for him. We got to, and she'll go, okay, so you got your cash over here. I mean, and literally it helps you get back to what you need to do to fix it. You know what I'm saying? But I really have enjoyed both sides. I don't think you would go wrong going either way. If you want to be a CPA, if you want to go into public accounting, again, I would do it earlier, because it's a lot more hours. It was for me. It wasn't for y'all. I mean, it's a lot more hours, even though private can be a lot of hours. And when you're younger, you're more willing to work a lot more hours, and then you get your foundation, and like I said, any interview I've gone into, people are like, wow, you're a CPA. I mean, and so it's something I'm very proud of. Just like y'all are proud of your bachelor's, that's something that's an accomplishment. That's amazing. You need to be proud of that too.
When you look at people that work in banks that have jobs like credit analysts and the people that, that work with the lending officers that are trying to look at somebody's statements and everything and evaluate those, do most of those people have accounting degrees, or some of them just kind of drifted into that through other?
You would be so surprised.
Other work.
They drifted into that. They really did. I mean, they did, because sometimes you talk to them and you're like, when I've gone to get my mortgage and they're like, oh, you can afford, I'm like, no, I cannot. What are you talking about? Sure. I mean, they really, it is a lot more finance. It is a lot more finance people. I don't know that I've dealt with very many bankers that are accountants, and they are a different breed, bankers. And I mean that in the nicest way, I really do. But they're more salesmen, right? Saleswomen. And they are more, it's all more cash flow, and it's more financial, looking at the credit analysis and stuff. It's very interesting. But I say like a right brain and left brain kind of thing. But like even at the hospital, we have a lady that's she's awesome. She has a different background than IT, and she's our IT person, but she's phenomenal. She does a great job. So, I think she learned through experience. So, I mean, experience goes a long way.
You're doing auditing.
Mm-hmm.
Or, with you having started off doing auditing, do you eventually find yourself trying to do auditing with what you're doing now?
I think because of doing auditing, when something goes wrong, my brain automatically goes, what else is wrong? Like if this happened, I automatically go, to me, I don't just look at it as one problem. I think, what else could have happened, or how many others, right? Like we've had some situations where something wasn't posted, and then I'm like, what else isn't posted? Absolutely. And I think that's a good way to look at things. I worked for a startup company, and I had to help them set the foundations, and I think that really helped me understanding the flow and understanding, like I was talking to y'all about a little bit about controls. I always get frustrated when like accounting systems are they built by accountants? No, they're built by IT people. Do IT people know anything about accounting controls? No, it makes me crazy. And so we have to kind of backdoor stuff. I mean, I do it all the time to stop things from happening. And you would think in this day and age they would have accounting people in on those things, but they don't. So we have to kind of build stuff in the background to fix problems you find. But yes, I think having that auditing experience has really helped me, definitely in the corporate world.
I'm currently in local government, so I deal with accounting, but I'm ready to switch over to more of like working for a CPA. But what positions do I actually need to look for? Like I've been looking for positions, but everything is requiring more experience than what I currently have, and I've been in accounting for like 12 years, but it's the experience that they're looking for. Like, of course I'll have my bachelor's come soon, but still, what position should I look for to switch over?
With you having government, she could be a governmental auditor. Have you worked in the accounting department in government?
Mm-hmm.
Because have any of y'all taken governmental audit? That's
Oh, because I need some time.
now that you mention it, because if any of y'all have taken governmental, it is a different.
It is.
It is really.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I work in government accounting. It is very different, and it's one of the most difficult things for me is the transition from what I do every day to what the school says or what the books say. I struggle with that.
I bet you do.
What we do in government accounting, We talk about gap all the time, but we don't. Government accounting is more on the Government Accounting Standards Board versus FASB, and so even though it's the same, it's very different.
It is very, very different.
And I will tell you that has been my greatest struggle. And sometimes I'm like, man, I didn't get an A in that class. But then I'm like, it's different stuff. It really is.
Because you know debits and credits, but y'all do the fund accounting and all of that stuff. And one entry is actually 3 entries. And you got to do this. And then you got to. I audited that, yes. So I think there's a lot of, there are small entities in our area that there's a lot, as y'all know, there's a lot of governmental agencies, and almost every governmental agency has to have an audit. And so I don't know that I wouldn't do some homework on who does the audits on the governmental agencies, because having that background, that is hard to learn. I don't know that I could do it now. It is really a completely different if y'all have had that class, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just different transactions. It's still debits and credits, but like I said, it's maybe 3 entries for every one that you would do in the corporate world. So I think looking for people who do governmental audits, I still think, yeah, they do.
They audit ours.
And Jenkins is probably the top one. I know they have this part of Georgia locked down.
And then, honestly, debits and credits. And so, you could also, try even, bookkeeping work just to get your foot in the door, or are y'all, when you graduate, I've always gotten a little frustrated, are y'all determined to move back to where you grew up, or are you going to broaden your horizons? And
I live here, so.
Yeah, so
you moved all over.
I did.
You had to be flexible to move to Valdosta or Macon.
Yes, and so my one just a little comment on that is go to an interview out of town. It wouldn't hurt you. It wouldn't hurt you to, talk to somebody else, to learn about different opportunities. This is a big state, there's a lot of different opportunities, and you may not want to pigeonhole yourself into just, where your mom and daddy are, or, just be willing to talk to other people, because, get in the car and go for an interview. And even if that opportunity isn't for you, you got some interview experience. You got to learn about another industry or somebody else. And it might make you, even if you don't want to do that, it might make you think, oh, well, maybe I should look for that opportunity here. But just be willing to maybe consider stuff that you might not, have thought of. Okay. I grew up in Watkinsville. I moved to the big city of Albany. Then we lived in Valdosta for 9 years. That's where our kids were born. Then we lived in Macon for 4 years, and then we wound up back. My husband's from Albany, back in Albany, or Lee County. And I've enjoyed living in different cities, but it does push you. It is scary, but it is also, it's exciting, and I've learned a lot, and I've met a lot of new, friends. But my parents were from North Carolina, and they moved to Watkinsville, so they kind of instilled that. Yeah, they instilled that in me to not be afraid to.
And even
live
if you
things.
be willing to just entertain what's in a 125-mile radius or
Right.
something like that, that's a 2-hour drive. So you could still go home for the day. You can go for Thanksgiving. You can go for Christmas. You can go for your mama's birthday. But sometimes you just can't have things work out, at least initially, all within that 20-mile radius of the spot that you would like to be. But there are some situations, sometimes you have a responsibility that requires that. But when you don't have those kind of restrictions, at least open your eyes to considering, a little bit broader geographic area when you're looking for a job. You don't have to go to Chicago. You might not even, some people don't want to live in Atlanta.
Right.
But you might think about Macon, or you might think about Valdosta or Savannah or something like that. So just have an open mind when you're searching for a position.
Really, and I've done that. I've driven out of town for an interview that I really didn't think that I was, but interested in, but it was another opportunity to meet somebody, and it was a good experience. So don't try not to open your mind to the possibilities, right.
You never know.
You don't.
You never know.
I didn't.
Somebody
Yeah.
may like you and tell somebody else. You get it wrong. That's the way it works. You just don't know. That's why you have to do just what you say.
You do. You have to be willing. And when I was at Malton Jenkins, this is one cool thing. We got, Barry and them got a contract, and we went to Connecticut I was up there for like 8 weeks. And that was so much fun. We went, like a big group of us went, and it was we were auditing some part. It was terrible. I don't even remember the whole situation, but it was some part of the dissolvement of one of the banking agencies, and we had to go. And so it was so neat. Like, I'd never been to Connecticut. I'd never, I mean, it was so funny because we would talk and they're like, say that again, and I was like, I didn't know that I was quite that Southern. But, I mean, that wasn't a long time of my life, but it was really, it's beautiful country. We got to do things on the weekend. We toured. We got to see neat things. So there's just a lot of neat things out there, and doors will open, but you gotta step out there.
You do.
Like my mama has always said, friends aren't going to come knocking on your door. A job's not going to come knocking on your door. You got to go knock on the door. You got to be that friend. You got to be that good employee. You've got to, maybe get yourself a little uncomfortable.
If someone were to ask you, how did you get that job, or what did you do to get that job, what would your response be?
I would say I definitely stepped out of my comfort zone. I always like, one thing I do when I go to interview, this might sound a little silly, but I would write down like positive things on a kind of a piece of paper for me. And then for me to kind of be like, breathe and, remind myself to not speak really fast. Remind myself, one thing always too, write down some questions and do some research. But I would write, because when you get in there, I've been in an interview that's a lot of people, and you're like, oh my goodness, and then you're nervous. But if you're prepared and you have your questions, and they don't care, I just take a little notepad, a little portfolio thing, and I'll have my resume. So take your resume, just in case, because what happens, people do not give the person you're interviewing with a copy of your resume sometimes, or, you may have done an update. Take your resume, take your questions, get there early. If you don't know where you're going, leave even earlier, because you could get behind an accident. You never know. Get there early. They like that. If you have to sit out in the lobby for 30 minutes, who cares? They know, and they will remember that. But write your questions down. Don't make them just general, vague questions. Do questions that are specific. One thing they always say, your first interview, don't ask about pay. And they usually just want to see who you are, and they want to get to know you. And they won't talk about pay till the next normally. And if they do, let them bring that up. Y'all, that's one good thing. I think that y'all have college guidance, career guidance office. Take advantage of that. Georgia had that, and you can do mock interviews. I'm sure y'all, I don't know if y'all do that here, but they have a lot of different resources, and you're paying for it with your tuition. Why not? Get involved, participate in clubs. They're going to be looking for that. They're going to want to see what you've done, just like when you applied to college. They want to know that you're interested and you're a go-getter. Set yourself apart from others. But I think too, like I said, with that letter that you send, make it personal. Tell them something about you. It doesn't have to be, really wordy. Do they say now they want your resume to be just a page, I think? I don't know how in the world. Mine's 2 pages, but as y'all can see, I've done a little bit of stuff. A little bit older than y'all are. So, what else, y'all?
You have something you wanted to say, Deidre?
One thing that I struggle with is in interviews, number one, be prepared. Know the company. Know something about the company that you're going to interview for. There's nothing worse than, for example, one of the questions that I ask is what is one of the most challenging things facing local governments today? And people look at me, you're in a local government, you're interviewing for a job in a local government, and you don't have an answer. So for things like that, you don't have to know the company, but at least have this broad perspective of the company. The other thing that's important, dress the part.
Oh, yeah, it's
Dress the
true.
part.
Yep.
I don't care if you have purple hair come next week after you're hired. If you go in, what you don't want people to do is judge you based on what you look like. And so, like, even though, like, I got a mohawk now, but you can believe if I had an interview, I wouldn't have one. But I mean, you just have to make sure that you're dressing the part. Now, if it's somebody that you know that's very different, and it depends on that particular, I would rather be overdressed than underdressed. Jeans and sweatshirts and t-shirts, and you would be surprised. It may seem funny to you all, or it may seem strange, but we actually have college graduates who come in like they just left the football field, and they want you to hire them for a professional. And I'm not real sure. I don't know what GSW teaches, but dress the part, know something about the company. And the other thing that I look for when you were talking, one of you mentioned about not having worked. Internships may not pay, but it's still job experience. Internships may not pay, but it's still job experience. Internships may not pay, but it's still job experience, because we look at that and say this person has actually done it. Versus if you come in and you have a degree and you don't have the internship, the other person has the degree and the internship, I'm probably more likely to give it to them than I am to you because they've done it.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've used up our time. We have a lot of, this has been great, and you know, Laura will be here for a few minutes, so if somebody wants to ask her a question, I'm sure you can, but I think we need to close out our webinar. But thank you, Laura, for coming. It means a great deal to us
Thank y'all for having me.
have an opportunity.